The Electoral Act Amendment Bill is one of the most polarizing pieces of legislation in the Ninth Assembly. Clause 52, which refers to electronic transmission of results, split lawmakers in the Senate sharply along party lines to the extent that a division was called on the vote for the first time in the Ninth Assembly.
Say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it.
After the public vote on Clause 52, the Senate approved that INEC may consider electronic transmission of results, provided the national coverage is adjudged to be adequate and secure by the National Communications Commission, NCC, and approved by the National Assembly. This amendment caused uncertainty in the public space as to the intention of Parliament in promoting credible elections and the fate of electronic transmission of results in future elections. Fast forward to Tuesday's plenary session. The Senate is reversing its decision and is giving electoral umpire INEC the free rein to determine the procedure of transmission of results during elections.
Voting at an election and transmission of results under this bill shall be in accordance with the procedure determined by the Commission.
Those in favor of Clause 52 as amended, say aye. Aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it.
The Senate also re-amended Clause 43, 63 and 87. Clause 87 refers to the procedure for party primaries, which the previous amendment prescribes direct and indirect primaries. The latest amendment is prescribing direct primaries for political parties.
I hold the view, Mr. President, that it is more cheaper, less cumbersome to have indirect primary elections.
If this our democracy will be strengthened, if this our democracy will grow, and if we are going to be able to take it to anything close to global best practice standards, it is time for us to adopt direct mode of primaries.
Those in favor of the amendment to Clause 87, 4, say aye. Those against say nay. The nays have it.
Briefing journalists after plenary, the Senate spokesperson throws more light on the re-amendment of the Electoral Act bill.
This would allow INEC, when they have the necessary wherewithal and competence, they don't need to come back for us to introduce electronic voting machine as part of the materials they will use for election.
The Senate's latest amendment of Section 52 to empower INEC to determine the procedure of transmission of results during elections is sure to delight many Nigerians and those in the civic space who have been agitating for a reversal of the earlier decision. Linda Akibe, Channels Television News.
Well, if you've been following this program from the very beginning, perhaps you would have seen it in the papers, on the front pages, most of them reporting on the fate of the Electoral Act so far, wondering what is happening. Some say political parties oppose NAS overriding PMB. You have a few of them here talking about the Electoral Act, and that's exactly what we're sinking our teeth into right now, as we wonder whether or not the president has penned his signature to the Electoral Act. Well, yesterday, our colleague on the sister program, Politics Today, spoke with the president's spokesperson, Garba Shehu, and he said that we shouldn't preempt the president. However, we're counting the days which the president had to append his signature, 30 days from when it was transmitted to the executive arm of government. It would seem that that elapsed yesterday, and it's unclear as to what precisely has happened. But from indications for such a landmark amendment, we imagine that there would have been some fanfare, assuming the president had penned his signature to it. We haven't seen that. We could be wrong. We could be right. We don't know. But perhaps today might give a clearer picture as to the fate. But in the meantime, we have with us two very gentlemen in the studio to give us their insights into what could happen. I mean, if the president has, if he hasn't, what their thoughts are as we wait to know what will happen with the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. In the studio with us, we have Mr. Austin Aigbe, who is a Senior Program Officer at the Center for Democracy and Development. He's also a member steering committee in Nigeria's Civil Society Situation Room. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily this morning.
Thank you so much.
And we also have with us Mr. Wale Balogun, who is a legal practitioner. Well, gentlemen, it's a delight to have you here this morning. I do not know what your stance is on this Electoral Act, but our colleague there, Linda Kigbe, was able to give us a background as to where we're coming from, particularly in the Senate, which she covers, in terms of how the bill traveled through to what it eventually became when it was eventually sent to the president. We saw the struggles, and it would seem that for the very first time, we saw the Senate reverse itself. You know, it points to the importance of this bill. And I think that the expectations as we enter 2022, because there will be 2 other elections before the country goes into a general election. So that bill is being awaited at least to serve as a test run for these elections. But so far, so good. What are your thoughts? The 30 days have now elapsed. We're not certain if the president has appended or not appended his signature to this bill. What are your thoughts as we await to know what the final outcome is?
Yes, the 30 days, by counting the number of days,
yes,
would expire like yesterday. But by the interpretation clause, when the last day fall on a Sunday, the next day, which is the working day, will be the last day. So today should actually be the last day. So we expect that President Buhari will transmit today and will sign today.
You're optimistic?
Yes. Anywhere the president is. Right now, the president is in Turkey. Anywhere the
he's
president...
back from what we understand.
Okay. Even if he's there, let me assume he's still there, because from what we understand, I haven't read that he's back. Even if the president is in the UK, is a president of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, anywhere he is, you have the seal of government. You have the authority. As a president, he can sign from anywhere around the world. Don't forget, we have had history of transmission of letters from the UK to the Senate. So it's not the first time the president will be signing anything outside of this country. We've had, at a time, some budget was sent from outside the country. So anywhere the president is seated, that is the office. And don't forget, we have mission houses across the federation, across the world, sorry. Anywhere you have the mission house, that is Nigeria domiciled in that country. It's just like the United States Embassy. That's the United States. The same way we have embassies in Turkey. Anywhere the president is seated. I am so much optimistic. You know why I'm optimistic?
Why?
Because the challenge with the bill, based on what political parties and, of course, governors have brought to the fore, is with direct primaries. And you know, President Buhari historically has always supported direct primaries. In fact, it was his primary election, he insisted that the presidential primary election should be direct primaries, while all of the others were indirect. So President Buhari favored direct primaries so well, and I'm too positive that he will sign and transmit appropriately.
Well, some people have said, speaking with governor yesterday, the governor of Rivers State, Nyesom Wike, was said to have said, no, that is not exactly the bone of contention. The bone of contention is electronic transmission, and that the direct or indirect primaries is the way the ruling party is trying to pull the wool over the eyes of Nigerians. But I'll let you we'll play his track too as well. We'll let you speak to that and have your opening comments when we come back from this break. Please stay with us.
I did say, and it's very clear, that the president was not going to sign the Electoral Act Amendment Bill. So I continue to say it, and I stand firm, because I know Mr. President, and I know the government, I know the party in power. So many people are talking about direct primaries. That is not the problem. That's not the problem. because the major issue is the transmission, electronic transmission of results. Now, what the ruling party in their conspiracy is trying to deceive Nigerians that the mere inclusion of the direct primaries in the Electoral Act amendment is the problem why the president does not want to sign, or why he has refused to sign. So the issue is this. Mr. President signed the petroleum industry bill and then sent back for an amendment of that bill. Now, if the President means well for this country, and if the President, as he had promised Nigerians, that he wants to conduct a free and fair election, nothing stops Mr. President by assenting to this amendment and then seek for an amendment as regards to the direct or indirect mode of conducting the primaries of the various political parties.
One or two things obviously is about to happen, or already has happened. Either the president has signed or has declined signature. For us, in the executive arm of the government, there is a protocol governing communication with the National Assembly. Even when we know, even when we have seen it, we don't make a disclosure. The National Assembly would feel rather unkindly treated if we go on the pages of newspaper and say, this is where or what is the president is saying. So please allow time. I believe that they should be in Tuesday. We're hoping they'll be there in big numbers. They possibly would have something to tell Nigerians. I don't know. I haven't seen anything and haven't been briefed. I think that you are making the assumption that as we speak, there is no decision. And I'm not in a position to tell you yes or no. But given the way things are done, the president would have completed his consultations some time back. The president would be communicating with the National Assembly whatever he decides, either yes or no.
Yes, Mr. Austin Aigbe and Mr. Wale Balogun, who's a legal practitioner, are still with us here in our Abuja studios. And we're talking about the Electoral Act Amendment Bill as transmitted to the President by the National Assembly. We'll wait to note the fate of that bill. But let me come to you, Mr. Balogun. What do you make of, the controversy that is trailing the President's signature, or will I say lack of it, to this particular Electoral Act Amendment Bill? What are your thoughts on it? Is it much ado about nothing, a storm in a teacup, or what are your thoughts?
Yeah, my view is it's certainly not a storm in the tea. This is because this amendment is so significant in the life of Nigerian democracy. We are supposedly supposed to be practicing what is called constitutional democracy or representative democracy. So if you look at the issue of direct primary or indirect primary, it's right at the heart of it. Who represents who? The participation of the people in electoral process, of who represents the sharing of the power. This is what democracy is all about. I've heard about the Governor Wike's view before, but I also in alignment with him with respect to the fact that it's not the amendment is not all about it's not all about direct or indirect primary. It's equally very significant, the issue of electronic transmission. We must not lose sight of that. So I feel that our president had 30 days. I'm wondering why they stayed this long. And as of yesterday, which were my colleague's interpretation, hopefully before the end of today, we should be able to know whether the president is going to agree to it or not. Where we can't speculate now, people have tried to look at the antecedent of our president. Is leaning. Governor Wike is one view. My colleague here is another view. is very, very optimistic that the president is going to do it. Governor Wike is not so optimistic. Well, I'm in between. I'll wait for the end of today to come and see what happens. But you can look at how the historical background of, as your colleague narrated, the National Assembly for the first time on such a significant issue reversed itself on this very issue. So if you look at it along that line, it will appear well, the impression is the fact that the National Assembly would not have done that without consultation with the president, because they took a position contrary to allowing direct primary. So for them to suddenly just say, okay, we are now for direct primary, the impression is the fact that being the ruling party and the president is the leader of the ruling party, they will possibly have consulted with him and he must have been in agreement with them. This is our presumption. So hopefully before the end of today, the president should be able to tell Nigerians, the transmission can be either of the two ways. It's that it goes back to the National Assembly, the procedure are well spelled out in the Constitution, Section 58, sub 3. What he needs to do is send it back to the National Assembly to say, oh, I've agreed or I've not agreed. Just like possibly we all know too, that's not the end of it. The National Assembly too will also have another bite to also say, oh, we agree with Mr. President or we do not agree with Mr. President. So we are all waiting, but it's a very, very significant enactment.
What a journey the Electoral Act has been, I mean, the Electoral Act amendment has been through. We saw the battle. In fact, it got to fisticuffs in the House of Representatives before they eventually were able to pass something. And we saw, for the as you rightly, concurred, the Senate reverse itself, from pressure and a number of other considerations, even in-house pressure amongst the senators themselves. And then we thought, okay, that was over, and there was going to be a done deal as soon as it got to the presidency. But then we saw that the president also needed advice. There was that letter which he wrote to INEC, asking their advice. It would seem that he wasn't just going to rely on the advice of his Attorney General. And we also saw open pressure from governors. There was no shame in terms of how, the governors were lobbying, and even lawmakers too. The leadership of the National Assembly had to pay at least 2 visits to the president over this particular amendment bill. Very significant. Why do you think it is particularly contentious?
Well, I listened to Governor Wike. I will, if you understand some kind of political narrative and this divide and rule tactics, for me that could be some kind of theoretical underpinning. Let's not make it direct primary challenge. Let's call it this one. Yes, before the Senate backed down, the pressure was on electronic transmission of result, electronic voting and transmission. There were 2 documents. The House of Rep did agree to those transmission, but the Senate said no, that if you must transmit, we must rely on a NCC, and then you must come back to us for approval. Based on pressure, like you said, the Senate realizing that the entire country needed this electronic transmission result. In fact, there were many state men, many state women, civil society organizations.
Was it just pressure alone? Because there was also the part that was unconstitutional, that INEC as an independent body could not be subject to either the NCC or the Senate. That's why I said it was pressure, because we had to, we did a lot of campaign. We used that as a campaign, that you can't subject INEC under NCC. NCC is a product of National Assembly. INEC is a product of the Constitution. So you can't subject INEC under. So those are our advocacy too. So where I'm heading to is that direct primaries are literally be accepted. Even the senators who came out boldly and said no to transmission of results because in their location there were no internet or there were no coverage. Every evidence points to the fact that these were all aimed to disinform people. And why do I say to disinform people? They accepted to hear the views of NCC, but declined to hear the views of INEC at the time of negotiation. INEC got every data at their disposal. They've worked with NCC to do high-level mapping, and it was clear that the entire country had minimal 2G coverage that can transmit data, maybe not pictures.
I mean, we know what data can easily be sent, unlike when you are touching pictures. So that was valid, and they needed, evidence don't lie, so when you prove it, you put it on the table, people are going to see it. On that basis, a lot of pressure, like we agreed. The Senate, in my opinion, I haven't seen that pressure is there. We needed to back down. However, and let me quickly also add that there was a conference committee. The conference committee actually did the harmonization. The Senate had the direct primaries in their proposal, but the House of Reps had direct and indirect primaries. But the conference committee, due to harmonization, accepted the House of Reps position on the clause that was contentious at that time, which is the electronic transmission of results. And then the conference committee also accepted the Senate proposal of direct primaries. Why I feel, or we feel at the civil society level, that the direct primaries is actually the major, is if you check the people opposing or lobbying Mr. President not to sign, every one of them enjoys the advantage of direct primaries. And for a lot of actors...
Indirect.
They're opposing direct primary.
Okay.
They are opposing direct primaries only as the means of selecting candidates. We know in this country that political parties, particularly the selection process, is the weakest link to strengthening our democracy. Political party selection process is so weird that if you do not belong to that circle, and even the member of National Assembly, they may fall prey to those circles. And apparently, the only way to put it is let everybody in the party vote. And I've also had a lot of argument that direct primaries wouldn't solve it, citing examples from Lagos and elsewhere. See, when you say direct primaries, everybody focuses on that direct primaries. What we have seen before in this country, people running direct primaries in Lagos and elsewhere, these are not direct primary elections. Direct primaries are conducted at the ward level where the party membership are instituted. Every party had their membership at the ward level. Every member coming up at that location to vote, they know each other. That's the essence of bottom-up democracy, and that's what direct primaries aim to achieve. Indirect primaries, electronic transmission of results, in my opinion, that has been laid to rest. I strongly hold that has been laid to rest because of the advantages it brings to the table. One of it is the economic benefit to run electronic transmission of results, which most actors have come to realize that it is true. I'll give you a metaphor. In 2019 election, there were 82...
Why do you think this will not solve the litigations?
We just talked about the time now. Now, for instance, the APC primary is coming up February, tentatively, as you've said. Now, so from February to February, where the national election will be, that will be 12 months. So now, let's say the primary will start after the convention, presumably, right? So the convention, the primaries will take average of about 90 days. So you're looking at March, April, May. Now, because they are pre-election issues, so they will take average of 180 days by the amendment to the Constitution Section 285 now. That's average of 180 days at the tribunal, at the High Court level, whether Federal High Court or State High Court. After that, another 180 days. 60 days at the Court of Appeal, 60 days at the Supreme Court. Now, you are almost in February 2023. So now you are not talking of whatever the level of litigation you are seeing with indirect primary. We know how contentious all these things are. So you can see between that February, or at least they will finish the convention in February. So from that March, you can just imagine the quantum of litigation.
Well, some people will say that's work for lawyers. I mean, I don't think you...
Of course, lawyers are not complaining. It will actually, maybe we can have this conversation again because it will, the process that leads to litigation is when people get angry, the selection process. And we are saying when you improve this selection process, it will downturn. If I know that I lose election gallantly, I will congratulate my neighbor. But when you come in a small room and you say that I cannot contest, or what happened to women, you buy form and you're not at the point of selection, you say, no, you are for governor, you will go for House of Reps, we have settled. Agreed, and we go out. And then you do some kind of kangaroo indirect primaries that people see. And you think, I won't go to court?
Have you considered the violence?
Well, let us, there are all manner of issues, but we'll wait to see what eventually will happen today, gentlemen. We have to thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us. We've been speaking with two gentlemen here in our studio. Mr. Austin Aigbe is of the CDD, that's the Center for Democracy and Development, and Mr. Wale Balogun is a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Edit this morning.